Welcome, everybody, to Talking Textiles. I am Adam Penner, a member of the ATA's Marine Fabricators Association and owner of AP Consulting and Technical Services. The goal of this podcast is to get to know a wide variety of positions and markets that make the advanced textiles world turn. We will be talking to professionals in different roles throughout this series to help inspire the next generation of textile professionals and anyone interested in learning about others' journeys in the world of textiles. The ATA offers advanced textiles content throughout the year, including the upcoming Advanced Textiles Expo taking place September 24th through the 26th in Anaheim, California. Please go to textiles.org/events to learn more. On today's episode, part two of the artificial intelligence topic, we are speaking with Dan Hughes, co-founder of Claritee.AI, a seasoned expert in generative AI with over 20 years of experience helping clients implement emerging technologies. And now let's talk textiles. Hi, I'm Adam Penner. Today is our guest, Dan Hughes. Welcome to the podcast, Dan.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it.
Well, let's start by talking about you a little bit. Could you tell us a little bit about your background? And I know you have a wide experience in data analytics and then artificial intelligence. So kind of tell us how you got here.
Sure. Started my career really focusing on helping clients implement ERP systems. So many of the textile companies, different types of ERP systems, I'm sure you have implemented or even may now be looking at different applications. And so when ERPs, early 2000s started coming out and really hitting the ground, we help clients select and implement those systems. And then what we discovered was they were implementing those systems, but not able to get the data out. And so they were capturing inventory and purchasing and sales orders, but they were still having problems getting the data out, which is still a common problem today. And so we started focusing on data analytics, getting data out of the systems, making it useful, helping them build KPIs, measure financial performance, just really utilizing their data more as a strategic asset. And then we did that for many, many years. And then this new, we'll call it the new version of AI instead of the traditional version, which has been around for a while, which we'll get into. But this new AI really is only a couple years old, and we'll be talking about generative AI. And we pivoted the company 2 years ago to just focus on that. And so we have a lot of experience helping clients work through new technology, implement new technology. And this is one of those new technologies we think is a nice addition to an organization, really, regardless of the size. Gen AI is one of those tools that can be implemented. So that's our background. We're very comfortable in these emerging technologies, and that's what we do now.
That's awesome. I love the transition from kind of traditional to generative AI. So I guess, was there anything in particular that kind of sparked your interest in AI, or was it just kind of the right technology at the time that came about?
Well, there was an interest. For the first time, we can actually communicate with computers using just regular language. We don't have to have the words to be correct in perfect sentences. And as soon as we saw ChatGPT come out, which was released in 2022, it really showed the world a very, very different way of interacting with computers. And ChatGPT was the fastest growing app. In 1 week, it had 1 million users, and in 3 months, it had, I think, 100 million users or some obscene amount of users. So the rapid adoption of users across the world was pretty evident. And the reason is because for the first time we could actually engage in a conversation, and it was intelligent. I mean, we could reason, we could ask questions, we could get answers back, we could engage in this back and forth. So we saw that as really that's the future of how we think business will be run is you'll just engage in a conversation with your data, and you'll just ask questions rather than the way it works now is you got to pull data out of a system, put it into Excel, manipulate it. It's kind of pain. It's a complex thing. Well, we see generative AI enabling all of us to just engage, with computers. And I will say, Siri and Alexa are examples of engaging with, computers, but the problem is they're kind of dumb and they only know how to respond based on what they've been trained on. And so if you say to Siri, weather, it will give you the weather. But if you say, Siri, what's the weather? Or you say, Siri, I was wondering what the weather was, it knows that, oh, this person wants to hear the weather. But if you deviate at all from that, they fall apart. Well, the new version of Siri and a new version of Alexa, which is coming soon, will blow people away because it will those applications will be able to actually perform tasks. You'll be able to say, well, look back when last time I spoke with sent an email to Adam, refresh me on what I sent it to him. And it'll just go back and look at your email, understand the context, and will say, last time you spoke with Adam, you talked about, the podcast or you talked about Marine Canvas. So that really, we saw that right away 2 years ago, that's where we're heading. And sure enough, that's where we're heading. Apple just announced this week that they will be, basically taking Siri to another level. We call, I think, Apple Intelligence or something.
Yeah, it's Apple's AI. They kept the acronym cleverly. Yeah, I saw that as well. There's some really interesting, even just really simple examples that I saw. One was like a text message that said, send Dan my ETA, which sounds pretty simple if you said that to your co-pilot driving down the street, but to a computer, that means that it has to like look at your maps and see when the ETA is. It's got to find Dan in your contacts. It's got to craft a text message that says the time and not just ETA. So yeah, really interesting. It's just a whole, or we're going generations past that first kind of Siri iteration where you could just tell it to schedule a meeting and you had to say it in the exact right order. And
Yeah, we've heard, we'll call it traditional AI, machine learning models, which really pre-Gen AI. We've heard it called dumb AI, traditional AI, pre-Gen AI. So we've entered a new era, that's for sure.
yeah, I guess that's a great segue to maybe explain to our listeners a little bit what the difference is between traditional and generative AI. What AI was doing, what that term meant, kind of AI and machine learning versus this new wave of technologies.
So artificial intelligence has actually been around since the 1950s. And so Alan Turing basically coined the term Turing test, and it measured the machine intelligence. And that was back in the 1950s. And so we've had computers that we could train on performing tasks for a number of years. In the 80s, we started to build applications and even experiment with industry specific problems like X-rays and, looking at images and determining things within images. That started, the 80s and 90s. IBM Watson played Jeopardy back in, 2011. We had Deep Blue in 1997, beat a chess champion. So these are all forms of AI. AlphaGo, which is a very complex game with lots and lots of outcomes, was AI was able to beat AlphaGo, the world champion in 2016. Being able to train models, AI models, to perform tasks and even do some strategy work with complex games. But the difference is we had to expend an enormous amount of time training the model. And so in 2018, 17, 18, this whole new, we'll call it the new generative AI architecture, a paper was released by Google. And then a company like OpenAI took that paper and they started building this tool, which ultimately became ChatGPT. And essentially what they took the model, that the architecture of Gen AI, and trained it on the body of knowledge on the internet. Now, for all intents and purposes, let's just assume think of the knowledge on the internet has been now encapsulated in an AI model. Now, it's not everything, and there was a lot that happened between doing that, but by training it on the body of knowledge on the internet, it now has factual knowledge. So you could run textile, very specific textile questions, either about materials or formula or chemistry. I mean, anything. You can run it in the model and you'll probably be surprised. It can answer a lot of your questions. You could talk about lean manufacturing. You could talk about marketing. These models have knowledge across industries, across functions, and that's because they've been trained on, well, for all intents and purposes, the internet. Now, what they also are experts in is language, because the real purpose is they understand they've been trained on all the language on the internet. They also are great writing assistants because they're better writers than we are. These AI models are experts in language. So now we get the benefit of, we can bring some ideas and then ask an AI model to help us formulate that into, say, a blog or a PowerPoint presentation. So they have an extensive amount of knowledge and they're experts in language. And that was essentially the release of ChatGPT. So that's what the world saw, is the first version of GPT 3.5 for the world to see. And wow, it had facts and we could reason with it. We could work through things, problems with it, and it could write. And so now that same technology has been applied to image generation. So you can create a very customized image. You could say, I want an awning for a restaurant in Charleston, South Carolina, and it's an Italian restaurant, and it will create an image with an awning, on a waterfront Italian restaurant, and you could say, give me variations of the fabric, and then it will recast the image and create another image. And it's able to create that unique, and why it's called generative AI. There's that unique, very specific image based on your prompting and what you ask of it, because it's been trained on lots and lots and lots of images. So these models are really something we've never had as humans. I mean, we've never had anything like this. Now we can do music. We're able to create videos. So there's all it can read images, which we're working on now, a lot of image projects where these AI models are very good at looking at fabric, looking for default defects in a fabric, for instance, or looking at a machine and wear and tear on a machine. And just, you could say, what's the condition of this belt on this machine? And surprisingly, some of these general models that, like ChatGPT, they're pretty darn good at spotting, things. So that's the difference, is you can reason with them, they can produce unique content, and they allow and enable human computer interaction. Those are the main differences.
Yeah, that interface has been, I think, to me, one of the big kind of striking differences where you've had probably a lot of AI in your life and you maybe had no idea, whether it was that Lay's conveyor belt that was blowing the bad chips off based off of, a video feed, or your phone searching for cell service, or the logistics of UPS, right? It was like kind of all in the background of a lot of people's everyday lives. And then now with this chat GPT and them putting this free model out there, and it's so accessible, you just, like you said, you just talk to it and type to it. It's been a really interesting transition here to bringing this really into people's everyday lives. You work in a variety of industries and a variety of business sizes. I think most of our listeners are probably in the small to medium business range, in a variety of kind of fabrication to manufacturing type roles. So where have you kind of seen the biggest impacts? And I guess we'll limit it to the last kind of 5 years or so of the generative AI boom. And where are you seeing the biggest impacts, and where has that been benefiting people on the ground the most?
Yeah, well, I think we have been working with a lot of small to medium-sized businesses, and I think everyone should understand, this technology is not for big companies only. This is very accessible for even a one person, 10-person shop. It's extremely accessible because ChatGPT is only, well, there's a free version and there's a, $20 a month version. And so that particular tool, which is only one application of Gen AI, all businesses should be experimenting with that. It's free. It's very easy to use. It's just like Google. There's a just like there's a search bar within Google. There's a prompt bar where you just enter your question or you enter your idea, One example is if you've ever used ChatGPT, go out to chatgpt.com. I think it's chatgpt.com, um, and sign up and just say, how can I use you? Or say, I'm running a 10-person manufacturing company and I want to understand how to use a tool like ChatGPT. Just ask the AI how it can help you. And then from there, you will engage in a conversation and you'll see it will give you ideas and then start presenting some challenges that you have. And so, number one rule is it's very accessible and you should not be intimidated by it. It's a pretty friendly interface. The second thing is a lot of the tools you're working with are going to start integrating generative AI. Microsoft Office is already started to integrate generative AI in its tools. You'll see that Canva, if you use Canva for marketing, any of your marketing applications, generative AI will be embedded in that. It already is. And so just everyday productivity tools will start to benefit from generative AI. So that's good. That doesn't require any additional fees. It's very low if it does. One of the things is education and just starting to recognize that this is a technology that's important. It's a technology not to be afraid of, but it's an augmentation tool. It's going to make your team better. It's going to make you more productive, and it's not going anywhere. It's going to continue to get better. I'll give you a very simple example. We had a meeting the other day, and we were talking about a particular thing for a customer. We recorded the meeting, and then we took the transcript of the meeting and put it into ChatGPT, and we said, summarize this meeting, extract the customer's requirements, and then help me create a proposal. So it created the body of the proposal based on the conversation we had. And so normally in the past, you'd have to take notes and you have to write it up and all of that. But because it recorded and listened to the conversation, it was able to just take what the customer was saying and our conversation translated in. And that's the free version of ChatGPT you can do that on. So any type of communication you're doing, we're seeing small, mid-sized companies adopting it for marketing, for email communications. There are lots of use cases which we can get into that people are not aware of, but I would say we're definitely seeing people either have never touched it, and all of a sudden we start talking, they say, "Whoa, how do I try that out?" So at minimum, don't be afraid of it. It's very accessible and start to jump in. And then as we continue the conversation, I'll talk about more advanced use cases of it.
Yeah, I really like your word there, augmentation of, your own abilities, right? A lot of people, and rightfully so, are very proud of the personalized service that they are giving their clients and customers. And I think there might be some fear or trepidation that this would replace them or devalue that kind of personal interaction a little bit. I don't know if you have any kind of thoughts on what that is, if using these technologies reduces that personal touch, or if it kind of gives you that extra bandwidth to put that personal effort in better places.
Yeah, it's a good question. And honestly, if you just rely on these tools to do your writing for you, it will sound it will sound sterile and AI. But what we have found is humans still need to be in the loop. But what it can do is let's talk about writing, just writing alone. It's an incredible document reviewer. So if you have a contract you need to review, or you need to write content, either for a customer or for marketing purposes, it's very good when you bring your ideas and your skill set and you work with the AI to help you shape it. And that's the augmentation part, is now you have an expert writer with you, but it's going to write a lot better if you bring your expertise and your very unique um, needs for whatever you're writing for. The quality of writing will be very good. But if you sit down and say, "Hey, write me a marketing slogan for and a blog for X topic," and it writes it, it's not going to be deep enough. People are going to sense that it's shallow. So you really need to, when you talk about writing, it only writes high quality work when you bring your expertise. And we found that to be that's and so that's a great augmentation tool. here's another example, reviewing. If you have to review a contract, I had to review a 20-page contract and I had a meeting that afternoon and I did not feel like going through the 20-page contract. So I loaded the contract and said, review the contract and tell me the areas that I should be concerned about. And that's exactly what I wrote in ChatGPT. And it reviewed the 20 pages and it produced the areas that were of most concerning. And it actually nailed it really good. And then I said, what are some recommended approaches? And it gave me some recommended approaches. So why could it do that? Because it has been trained in law. In the case of ChatGPT, we'll just use that example. It's passed the uniform bar exam. And so it knows more about legal than most people. And so you can use it to bounce things off of and get opinions. Still using a human, you still will have an attorney, but it augments us to be able to do work that we may used to have maybe had passed off to someone else. So that's another example of an augmentation tool. And then the third one, which I think most people are not aware of it, is a data analysis tool. It has a very good ability to analyze large volumes of Excel data and perform inventory analysis, sales analysis. It can perform for bigger organizations, variance analysis, looking at individual accounts. And that's all in the free version of ChatGPT is you can load Excel files and you can actually produce visualizations from it, charts and graphs. You can ask questions. And so that's another augmentation tool where you may have to rely on someone who's an expert in Excel to do some work for you. Now you can just leverage this tool and just speak in natural language and use it to perform the analysis that you would, and so it's not replacing anyone, but I guarantee your data analysis person, whoever you use, is going to be probably 5 times more productive now with this type of tool.
Yeah, I really like that. I like that they can, the way you said just then, 5 times more productive with this tool, right? And that's kind of the goal of really any tool, right? Whether it's a carpenter using a nail gun instead of a hammer, just augmenting those skills and abilities to be more productive and more effective, at really whatever you're trying to do, whether it's get a proposal together quickly or prepare for a meeting, write that marketing content, whatever that might be. So I guess from that, I'm curious what your opinion is on maybe some of the risks. I was in class the other night and it was a accounting class and the professor said something to the extent of, well, you can try to use ChatGPT, but really it just gives the wrong answers to all these questions. It doesn't know anything about accounting and tax. You shouldn't even bother to use it. And it really kind of struck me as somebody who's honestly probably never even opened a website. Or if they did, they put one thing in there, they tricked it and said, this is useless, kind of thing. But it does definitely raise some of the concerns about risk potentially. So I guess where do you see some risks within using this technology to either in general or to augment something that you're already doing?
Yeah, that's a common argument. In the early days, I think it's called hallucination. And it is actually a really good, we'll call it's a really good BSer. It can state things in such a strong way that it really does sound true. So hallucination, let's talk about that. We have found the only time we see hallucination is when someone doesn't understand the topic they're engaged in.
Mhm.
So, for instance, you could engage in using this tool for medical advice, and you could feed your blood work in, and then you could start to go really deep on that. Well, without really understanding what the subject area is, you run the risk of some hallucination. But if you said, "Hey, give me 12 questions to, talk to my doctor about with my blood work," those are probably going to be pretty good because it's going to analyze the blood work, give you the questions, you meet with your physician, and you talk about that. So, if the more detail and the more experience you bring to the tool, as we mentioned before, the higher quality the outputs will be. Now, I have seen the tax advice be very good, actually. And so for that one example, and it's actually pretty good at like things like gap accounting and there really is knowledge there. But the thing is, I would just say you really have to be competent in your area when you rely on this tool. I would not rely on this tool in an area that I'm not competent in. I would have it checked. But that's the same way if I asked you for your opinion, Adam, and you gave me your opinion, I always like to say humans hallucinate all the time. I mean, people give advice that's bad all the time, and it's not factually true. So AIs are really no different than people. And you have to fact check people, right? You don't just take what someone says and run with it. So I kind of find it funny that, we have the same problem with people.
Yeah, and I think we're kind of giving ourselves a lot of benefits of the doubt here about our failure to or absence of mistakes in our everyday when we say, "Oh, ChatGPT messed this up." And it's like, well, yeah, it has read 8 law books that I've never read before, and it gave me all this fantastic information that was all correct, and then there's one little thing that was wrong. So I think,
Yeah, but if you talk to a human, your accuracy rate may be 60%. Even people. Here's another thing though, on the data analysis part, we talked about, since you're talking about accounting and in accounting and finance, one of the knocks on the early days of the AI models, the Gen AI models, was their ability to do math. And that was true. The math was not, they did not perform math well. Here's the thing though, with ChatGPT, for instance, when you say you load a complex Excel file and you want to perform, say, forecasting, or you want to do full analysis on that data, that in the case of ChatGPT's example, is calling a programming language called Python, which is like, for those who don't know, it's an advanced programming language that performs math and can performs things that you would do in Excel, and it can perform it very extensive complex math. But the beauty is you're asking the question in natural language, but ChatGPT is passing it to a programming language to perform the task. So when it brings the results back, you actually can get an audit of that result because you can see the code that was written. So we have found it to be very reliable on the math side when leveraging the code, and we're very comfortable with the answers, and we can audit the answers. As a matter of fact, we had to calculate a turnover rate for a customer, and the turnover rate, let's say it was, say, 40% for a particular function. We then asked it to audit itself and prove to us that the 40% was accurate. And it actually performed an audit and showed us the work of how it got to that 40%. So that's something most people don't even know you can do with a Gen AI model, is you can have it audit itself and show you the proof. There's definitely ways to, as you work with these tools, and that would say that's more of a level of sophistication. A lot of people do throw out, well, hallucination, it's not accurate, all that. It is probably true that most people say that probably haven't really done a deeper dive in it. But you do have to be aware of it. But we don't really have that problem, and we try to teach clients to work with the tools so they avoid things like that.
absolutely. I think I really like that example of the math because I do remember that at the beginning when the math was not the best. But to kind of anthropomorphize the model a little bit, that's kind of the exact same process that a human would take, right? If you said, multiply two 4-digit numbers together, you wouldn't do it in your head. Well, most people wouldn't do it in their head. They'd grab a calculator or their phone and the calculator app, right? And then do it and then show you that answer. And in a way, ChatGPT is doing the same thing, right? It's taking that question, it's putting it into Python, it's getting that answer, and then it's returning it to you back into that format. So I think that's pretty fascinating.
And the difference in now, if you can't ask Excel to give you an audit trail of how it calculated it, for instance, you can trace the formula down, right? Say you have a real complex formula in Excel, you can trace it down, but you cannot say, actually break it down further and show me your work. You can't really do that. A human would have to break the formula down and show you the work. So that's a huge advantage, is now we can have the AI do the work that we would have to figure out ourselves.
I guess a little transition here from the risks. Do you this is a very broad topic again. I'm kind of both in the going to school and in the professional world, and I can tell you academia is reeling with this. Everybody trying to wrap their heads around what is a student's content versus ChatGPT, and what's an acceptable level to use it versus your own knowledge and everything. I think the professional world, that that calculus changes pretty drastically. But what's kind of your opinion on the ethics and how using this stuff, and what you need to what you should tell people is from ChatGPT or your own thoughts? Where do you stand on that?
Yeah, well, there's a couple things. One is, let's just talk about just general writing. So there's two different scenarios, right? There's one is, so a customer came to us and said, "Hey, I want AI to intercept every email that comes in from a customer, and I wanted to look up on a knowledge base and answer the email to the customer." Okay, so that's a perfect example. Maybe customers ask the same question all the time. Well, there's no reason why AI could not intercept the email, do a lookup in the knowledge base, and then craft a response. Now, in that type of scenario, I probably at the bottom would note this has been generated by AI because I'd want to make sure because AI does have some variation. I'd want to make sure the customer, in case something was put in there that seemed odd or something, I would actually qualify that email and just maybe a little fine print at the bottom. And so that's one example where you can use AI to do fully response writing. And it probably, actually, we've done some prototyping. It does a pretty good job. But then there's your personal blog or something that has your name on it. In that example, I think it's better to do some of the writing yourself and then have Gen AI review your grammar, review for clarity, and then make suggestions and then make the update from there. Either you manually make the update or you tell it to now rewrite based on those. In that case, where it's a lot of your content and a lot of your ideas, and I don't think there's a need to disclose that at all because it's your original thoughts, and you can defend that too. But if you're auto-generating a blog every month and it sounds sterile, I think it affects your credibility. So I don't know about an ethics thing, but I think your credibility would show. Well, Adam, all he does is puts out stuff that's AI generated. There's no substance there, right? So I would say that's how we look at it. On the case of generating images, when you generate an image from a tool like ChatGPT, I mean, that image is an original image based on your prompt. And I think OpenAI in a small print may have that they also own a copyright of that or something. I'm actually not sure. But that is an image that you created. I don't find a need to disclose that at all because that's a unique image based on a unique prompt. And so that's where I come down on that. I think the data security, when we talked about risk, the only thing I didn't mention was the data you put into these tools. I think it's still an emergent technology. And the policy of, in the case of OpenAI or Anthropic or one of the other big companies, is we won't use your data for training if you pay for a certain service. However, the data could still be hacked. We don't know. The data is still ending up it's like another cloud service. It's ending up in the OpenAI environment. I would not be putting proprietary formulas in any type of. We mask information. If we have any proprietary customer information, we mask it and just have IDs. We don't. So I think it's just prudent to certainly don't put personally sensitive information in there. It's not that the AI models or that data is going to show up when someone else does a query. At least that's what the vendors are saying, is they're protecting the data that way. I just think it's just prudent. It's early days, and we should be careful. Now, open source models is a whole nother discussion, but that's going to allow us to pull open source models down in our own environment, and no one will have access to that. And that's where we see the proprietary data going. And it will be your own open source model, and you can train it on your data or some of your rules. And it's called fine tuning the model. And that's it. You have your own thing. No one can get to it unless, of course, they hack you're behind your firewall.
Yeah, I think that's a great word of warning there. I know I have several friends who work for, larger companies, and they're still working towards integrating their own kind of internal tools because they have a lot of proprietary code or other information that they simply just can't put out there onto chatgpt.com, because that information is too valuable. So definitely, definitely a wise warning to be careful if you have that proprietary info or, loading up whatever. I don't know. Your client list probably isn't that private, but other things like that, definitely be careful with that.
I do want to say a couple things about workflow automation, if I could, if we can
Yeah,
cover
absolutely.
that. So today we've just talked about ChatGPT, and I say that's, really the entry point. Everyone should be, every company should have an account and start to experiment in how it can be used. Think of that as your low barrier to entry. You can get in, start augmenting yourself in different areas. But the big thing we see, and this will affect small business as well, because the cost of implementing it's not going to be that great, is what we're you'll hear the term agents and workflow automation using agents. You'll hear the term assistants. And so it's the idea of having AI perform tasks that humans are performing now. So for instance, we had a customer say to us, could we have an AI agent just do research every day looking for leads? And we'll provide the rules and the work that a human does. And, we may want it to go out and search for a keyword in Google and then bring that information back and then go out to LinkedIn and scrape LinkedIn and then maybe go to business, Dun and Bradstreet or and then bring that data back and then maybe do another task. Well, that's what a salesperson has to do every day. Well, that would be an example of an agent, and it's a workflow that is set up to perform tasks that humans would perform. And a lot every when you look at your business and you look at what are humans doing and what's taking a lot of the time, you find that there are probably candidates that and the technology is getting better. So honestly, by the end of the year, this agent technology, we'll call it workflow on me, it's going to be really good. It's just getting better and better. So we have a lot of confidence in this area. But examine what your business is spending most of the time on, and chances are it's a candidate for generative AI workflow automation using generative AI. And so that's one thing I wanted to say. The other thing, the vision for those of you who vision technology is getting very, very good, and we're doing a number of use cases. And one thing that just keeps coming up over and over again is we have humans review architectural drawings, complex schematics for parts or whatever you're making in the fabric world, and you have drawings or however the CAD. I think Adam, you do work in the CAD world. What we are seeing over and over again is can we have AI review complex drawings and diagrams? And so we are working on a couple, the technology's there. We feel like it's going to be good. We're working on a couple proof of concepts to get this working. That's only going to get better though. And so I see probably even next year, we're going to start to probably transition to a lot of what humans have to read and decipher because the vision capability is so good, it can look at objects, diagrams, and it can interpret just like a human. It doesn't just look for words or objects. It can actually interpret what's in the image. Be aware if you do a lot of that type of work, that help is on the way. And that's another area where we're pretty optimistic on, and that's the whole vision. Just yesterday, I had a guy say to me, he's basically he spends 3 hours, 4 hours a day looking at drawings, and he's about ready to jump out the window, after an hour or two, because it's just so mundane. And no human wants to be looking through complex diagrams and drawings every single day. It's very tedious. And we think AI is a great candidate for that. And that's this new generative AI. It's going to be able to solve that problem.
I like that a lot. I think that's going to be a huge step forward. And like you said, the technology is there. It's just a matter of implementing it and getting it getting it into that format to where it's useful for these tasks that previously might have been too small for a big company to make make a solution for. Yeah, you're not going to find Apple making this software for you, but now that this stuff is so easy to use and implement, we might we might be able to find that.
Yeah, I mean, we're still in the early innings and maybe even be the pre-first inning, but we're not far from being in the first, second, third inning and the technology being available to the SMBs. I mean, the clients we're working on to solve this problem are small to mid-sized businesses. So it's coming. It still needs some work, but we're pretty optimistic it's going to happen.
Well, that kind of leads nicely into my next question here of at what point do you think this generative AI technology is at? Is it in its infancy? Is it a toddler? I won't even give you the option of teen because I think it's a little, I don't think we're there yet. But where do you think this is and kind of where, I won't make you go 10 years out, but where do you think we're going to be in, next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I do believe we will look back at this era. 2024 is in 2023 was the introduction. In 2022, it was GPT, ChatGPT came out, but 2023 was what is this thing? And the vendors starting to, like OpenAI and building these models out, and people getting comfortable with what it is. 2024 is the year where you're actually seeing people start to implement in more of a simple way. I mean, it's not full blown across the enterprise, that type of, the company, that type of thing. But you're seeing people start to pilot and program and with this, and you're also seeing the tools implementing it, like Canva, Microsoft 365. All these tools are starting to put AI in it. And you're also seeing the introduction of workflow automation with Gen AI. It started in 2023, but it's getting better. And for the first time, like the use case where someone said, could we just have an email intercept it and take what the customer asked, go to the knowledge base, review it, pull it back, and send an email back? The workflow automation tools now can do that. And so we're starting to see workflow automation take off. So where does it take us? I still think I think by the end of the year, people will be very surprised how far we come. What we typically think will happen in 5 years will probably happen in two. And what we think will take 2 years will probably happen in 10 months. What does that mean? I think this assistant and agent, where we give task to AI to perform, I think that will be the big thing over the next couple of years. And a lot of the tasks, especially in the small and mid-sized businesses that we're doing manually, proposal development, which is a killer, is building proposals. We've had multiple people say it's so manually intensive, it's so painful. A lot of the accounting, getting invoices in and posting invoices to the system, I believe a lot of that will be able to be turned into agents. Research, the sales function, I think will be tremendously benefit from agents being able to perform tasks that humans, do now. So it's agents, I think, will be the theme. And even Siri, as you saw from Apple, their whole idea with the new version of Apple Intelligence, it's basically, hey, Siri, or whatever they're calling it, I need you to go, find me a restaurant for, my sister's birthday, and then send it out to the entire family. Oh, and then write a nice little note. Well, that's not something that happened today because in order to do that, it has to go find your sister's birthday. It has to find all the people that it should go out to. It has to find the restaurant, has to make the appointment, has to send a nice note. That's the something an agent will be able to do right on your phone. And that's probably not, I believe that's probably pretty soon. Apple will probably be able to accomplish that, I would think, in a year or so. Just guess, but
I like it. I'm excited to have, 5 secretaries on my phone here to do everything that I need to do. Get a little extra time next to the time on the beach for me.
so you think about the companies who are starting to educate themselves now just by using these tools. As this agent technology comes available, you'll just be in a better position to implement it. And it will not be a big ticket item. I can assure you that these type technologies will be within reach of an SMB.
Absolutely. And, just based on what we've seen with companies doing so far, I mean, the memberships to like ChatGPT are incredibly reasonable. I think it's $20 a month. Same with Microsoft Copilot. Now, those might change once they have, more data and the newer models come out, of course. But for right now, these are really low entry level. It's a Netflix subscription to get into the nice models, everything.
Yeah, and there are two other vendors, just I'll throw out for anyone who's technically savvy and who wants to look into it. Both Zapier and Make are workflow automation tools, and they both have capital behind them, and they are also integrating AI, and they're definitely small to mid-sized business type automation tools that are, I think the capabilities are nicely developing. So Zapier and Make are two examples of workflow automation agent type tools, and there'll be more to come.
Those are going right on my notes here to look up after the podcast here. So I guess we got give you one final question here, and it's gonna be what advice would you give to someone looking to pursue a career in AI or maybe transfer within their company to be the AI guru? Where would you tell somebody to start and point them?
Well, yeah, it's funny. It's really when you blend domain expertise. So each of us have some sort of a specialty or an expertise, whether it's accounting, purchasing, sales. You can make a tremendous difference in especially with AI now by joining your skill set. So let's say you're in finance and you have an expertise in accounting and finance. By embracing AI and saying, I'm going to try to figure out how I can leverage AI to automate a lot of processes that I do. Instead of looking at it as I need to protect my job, look at it as I want to use this type of technology to automate as much as possible. So it accomplishes two things. One is it's more fun to go to work when you're actually innovating and solving problems. And two, you actually develop an expertise that becomes very valuable to others because you took an expertise with deep within accounting, and now you figured out how to do automation, and all of a sudden you have a skill set now. You have a new skill set that's sought after by the market. And I think that goes across any industry is take what you're good at and what you're an expert at and figure out how to use AI to make that job better. And in the process, you will become an AI person and you'll be an expert in automating that particular process or augmenting. Maybe you just augment yourself, but even that skill alone, in some cases, programmers can, 5x themselves. I mean, a well-equipped finance person who knows how to use AI as a tool, I mean, that's a that's a huge multiplier. Sales, same thing. I mean, a really good salesperson who understands sales process and understands a product really well, and then augments himself with AI. So that's the secret sauce, is it's bringing in my opinion, it's bringing the expertise of what something, domain or function or industry, and coupling it with AI. And that I think that's what I would recommend. And then those who are more technically oriented and they want to be programmers, well, you have to learn Python because Python's the language of AI, and it's the most powerful language on Earth in the areas that we work in. So that's my recommendation.
I think that's all fantastic advice. And as someone who taught themselves Python, there's a ton of resources online. And honestly, at this point, you could probably have AI help teach you how to code. So very it's not if you want to go to school for it, I think that's fantastic, but that's definitely not something you absolutely have to do to get in and get proficient.
That's right. You can take an angle, like you can take a programming angle, like you just said, or you can take a no, I'm a functional expert, but I'm going to learn how to bring AI into that function. And that's another path. Yep.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, I think we're running up on time here, so I just want to thank you very much for your time and your expertise here. I think this will be extremely valuable to our listeners. For anybody else listening that's in the marine canvas side, Dan has a boat. So when he needs some canvas, I hope somebody steps up and helps him out there.
I do need some canvas soon. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you for joining us on this episode of ATA Talking Textiles. ATA is a not-for-profit association representing the international specialty fabrics marketplace. Learn more about the events, workshops, and webinars ATA hosts throughout the year at textiles.org/events.